It's time to share my journey into the world of healing, intuition, and spiritual discovery. As I find my place as a healer, psychic, and medium, I'm here to share my experiences and insights in hopes of breaking down barriers between different spiritual perspectives. Whether you're curious about energy work, looking to deepen your understanding, or just exploring your own path, this podcast offers stories, teachings, and connections to help you navigate the space between worlds. I'm Heather, and this is Soulful Wonderings. Are you coming along for the ride? So today is a continuation of sorts of our last episode where I was speaking about my spiritual journey, the next step I had taken, which was starting to develop my gifts. And now I want to talk more about what I learned. I want to get into our gifts a little bit and talk about kind of what I did to develop after that initial awakening, if you will. And again, I think this fits perfectly into April, which is where we are as this is airing. And I'm into my new year, new journey. This is just spring, and it's such a beautiful time for awakening, which is, exactly what I did. And I think I've got some information here that may be able to help you out if you're a little curious about this. And maybe it's time for you to explore this a little bit and awaken yourself. So again, if you recall in the last episode, I was finally learning what my gifts were, and it was just incredibly validating and liberating in a lot of ways. I had seen things happen so many times in my life and that I just couldn't explain. And again, finally, they started to make sense. There was the day that I saw someone sitting in my dad's recliner that looked rather like him, or maybe my grandfather. They looked very much alike. But I was home alone. So, okay. And then there was the day that my phone rang. I was in college, and before it ever rang, I knew it was my dad. Because normally it was my mom, but I knew it was my dad, and I knew it was because something was wrong. And then there was the day that my mom actually passed away. I woke up, I'm saying to myself, you need to get ready. You need to get ready. You need to get ready. But what I normally did was sort of run that list of what I needed to do so that we could get ready to go. Because the normal routine was to get up, get ready, go to the hospital, make breakfast, do all the things. But that day, it was just, you need to get ready. You need to get ready. And then it wasn't long until my sister knocked on the door, which was so odd. I don't know why she knocked on the door. But she knocked on the door to tell us. And those are just a few, okay? And I agree with my teacher in this, that I do believe that we all have gifts. And then it's just a matter of choosing to use them or not. And for much of my life, I don't think I realized it was a gift. I don't think I really realized what's going on. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, that they have these things happening, but they don't really know what it means, or even how to pursue it if they wanted to. So I think once people are curious, or maybe someone else starts to talk about it and they go, wait a minute, what is this? Can you explain it to me? And I guess that's kind of what I'm hoping that this will help do, if you're curious and want to know. So what do I mean by these gifts? Well, I think probably the ones we see the most, people have the most, are going to be people that are empathic. Or there's also what we call the Clair senses. And I've actually done an episode on this before. This was back 2 or 3 years ago maybe, and kind of back when I was really still first starting out on this journey. So that was season 1, episode 20. If you want to give it a listen, feel free. It's probably a little more in depth than what I'm about to talk about. But I'm going to go over some of it again today. And look, before we go too far into this, okay, I am not debating the religious aspects of this today. Okay, that's not what this episode is about. I believe these are gifts. I believe that we help people daily with these gifts, and I can't imagine that God would give me a gift like this if it were bad. And I'm not even going to get started on missing books of the Bible and things like that start to support this. So that is a completely different conversation. And what I am going to say is you're welcome to believe what you wish. And I respect that. No matter who you are, what you believe, I respect it. We all have our different thoughts on this. And if you one day want to have a conversation about it, let's do it. I think we should talk. I think it would be great because I love hearing other people's sides of things. That's how we learn and that's how we grow. But for now, let's just talk about what the gifts are. Okay, so let's get started with an empath. And of course, I was looking for a good description. So, of course, I went to Google. And Healthline actually had what I thought was a great description. So, a person who is highly attuned to the energies and emotions of those around them may be considered an empath. Empaths are said to feel what others are feeling so deeply that they absorb or take on the emotions themselves, often at the expense of their own emotional well-being. That actually feels pretty accurate. I wish I had known that a long time ago. For reals, I wish someone would have told me that. I just knew I couldn't be in crowds. Didn't know why. Now, people might say, well, they're just overstimulated. And I mean, okay, maybe. I guess that's one way to say it. But at the end of the day, that's energy, and it's all about energy. We're surrounded by energy. Everything has energy. And I know I pick up on all that energy, and my body just often can't handle it. So over the years, I've learned some methods to deal with it so that I'm a little better now. But the reality is sometimes I just can't do it, and I have to be aware of what I'm able to do and what I need to do for myself so that I can handle those situations, because sometimes they're part of my job or something like that. And it's something I need to do. I need to be able to handle that. There are different types of empaths, evidently. I'm actually still learning about empaths. So we will make sure we talk more about empathic abilities in another episode and get into that. But just know that that is something that I think a lot of people have. I just have to wonder if, now they use the word neurodivergent. When I was young, they didn't have a word for it. But ADD people, autistic people, things like that, they get overstimulated really easily. And I really believe that stimulation is tied to the energy. And if we could figure out ways to help deal with the energy, I think it could really help people's symptoms and challenges with those kinds of things. So anyway, we will talk about that more another day, but I did learn some things about shielding and some things like that I do to kind of help myself handle all those emotions. But there's also a few things that I'm going to talk about here in a minute that have really helped me, not only with my clear senses, but with the empathic thing. So stay with me, okay? Let's get into the clear senses to help talk about some of this. Now, I'm aware of 5, and I've seen some people say that there are more. I've also seen them grouped a little differently. I'm going to say feel free to do your own research if you wish. This is based on my research, and it worked for me how it's broken down. So I feel like it's a good place to start. So the first one is clairvoyance, and we probably hear about this one a lot. I feel like in pop culture and things like that, people will talk about clairvoyance, even if that's not what it really is. That's the word they use. But basically, this is seeing. And we said third eye, right? We talked about that. I think that was last episode. And that's basically what this is. It's really popular. I think a lot of people have this sense. I know for me, it's probably my most powerful sense. It's how I get most of my messages and downloads. Maybe because I'm a super visual person, I'm a creative, I'm artist, photographer, all the things. So I believe that's why that's true for me. And there are I've seen people that would agree that may be true for others that tend to be visual people. So for me, when I get messages, or I get images rather, that help me understand a message. And it could be an item, it could be a person, it could be a place. And then I can ask things like, is this for me? Or is this for the person I'm helping? Or is this for the person that's giving me the message? Because sometimes if I'm getting an image, it could be somebody from the other side. It could be creator. Maybe you refer to creator as spirit, God, whatever. So I kind of have to determine where it's coming from. So I'll ask, is this for me? Is this for someone else? And if it means something to me, then I can then convey that sentiment. So if I'm being shown an image that means something to me, and sometimes I'll be shown an image that creator knows I'll understand. That sometimes I'll see a scene from a movie and I then remember that movie and the context and what that character was saying or whatever, to where I go, oh, so that's what you're trying to tell me. Okay, I understand it. So sometimes I feel like they're telling me something or showing me something that I will understand, so that I will then know how to say it properly. So for example, if I see a cabin on a mountaintop, beautiful lush green and trees and all that, that's showing me peace. So if this is, a medium reading, then that's telling me that the person I'm speaking with is letting me know, look, I'm at peace. I also get a very serene beach scene for that sometimes, where I'm on a beach and with the beautiful white sand and just that soft water lapping. To me, that's a very peaceful feeling. And so that's conveying peace to me. But if it's for them, maybe I'm being shown a sailboat. Well, a sailboat doesn't really mean anything to me. That doesn't have any significance in my life. So I might ask creator or whoever's talking to me, is the sailboat for me or them? It's for them. Okay. So then I'm looking at the person that this message is for, saying, okay, they're showing me a sailboat. Does that mean anything to you? And then at that point, I need them to sort of help me sort out what it means. But we can do that through questions. Okay, does someone own a sailboat? Did you ever ride on a sailboat? Is this? And then we can start to put together what that sailboat means and what the message is, right? So, did that get long? Do you understand? So images often mean something. The key for me is to determine, does it mean something to me or something to them being the person that the message is for. Okay. But images, if an image is popping into your head randomly, it probably means something. It's probably there for a reason. So let's move on to the second one, and that is clairaudience. And so that's basically hearing. This one has become more powerful for me. I have people talking in my head more frequently than I would necessarily like. I've had it happen where I'm like, okay, who are you? Why are you talking to me? It can also be music or just some other kind of auditory cue. And just like for the visual Clair, often people that are good listeners may have clairaudience as a really strong sense for them. So think about, singers, musicians, counselors, and maybe that's why mine's come on, because I'm doing more in the healing realm and more in the kind of coaching realm, and I do sing and do music and things like that. So it really does make sense that these are strong clairs for me. So there may be times where you're all of a sudden hearing a melody and you wonder why. And that's when you start to go, okay, why am I hearing this? Is this for me? Is this for them? Next is going to be clairsentience, and that's feeling. I get that one a lot as well. It sometimes someone that I'm connected to is sending me an emotion so that I can convey it. Sometimes it can also be, that nagging gut feeling that you can't really shake. Or maybe you meet someone and immediately you think you get kind of an ick and you go, I'm not sure about that person. Or maybe you meet someone and you immediately connect with them and feel like they're a soulmate. Those are all kind of that feeling that you don't want to ignore. But I've had people that are talking to me, and suddenly I'll just get an emotion that overwhelms me. I had that happen one time where I was absolutely overpowered by anxiety out of the blue, and I just went, okay, wait, is this mine? And I kind of had to connect to my own body and say, is this my anxiety? No, that's not my anxiety. Okay, then who's trying to talk to me? And then I was able to connect to who it was. But I really had to figure out, is this mine? Is this theirs? But feelings are big, and it's something I'm going to tell you. Don't ignore them. If you have a gut feeling about someone, it's probably right. The next one, I'm going to butcher how I say it, just letting you know. Clairaudience, I think is right. So please forgive me. I probably didn't do it right. I struggle a lot with that one. And this is one that I actually don't have very often. It's very rare for me to have one like this. And it's smell, or sort of detecting an odor. The few times I have had it, for instance, I'll smell the powder that my mom used to wear. Do y'all remember? Y'all might not be old enough. Avon used to sell these scented powders. They were lovely. It was kind of like a talc type powder, but they had this very usually sort of subtle scent. And I remember after my mom would take a bath Sunday afternoon, she had cooked, she'd done all the things, had a busy week, and Sunday was hers. And so once we got home from church, she would do the things she needed to around the house, and then she always took a bath early and watched. There were a couple shows she watched. I think it was Murder, She Wrote was the one. Am I aging myself? She loved Murder, She Wrote, and she didn't want to be disturbed while she was watching it. And she would have a really easy dinner, and she just wanted to have time to herself. But I will never forget the scent of that powder that she would put on. And once in a while, I'll just kind of smell that scent, and so and it just takes me back to her. And usually it's her trying to tell me something. So that's not a super strong Clair for me, but they do happen sometimes. There are people that will smell. They may smell cigar smoke. I have a friend that'll smell cigarette smoke when it's one of her loved ones that's around, or certain perfume, things like that. But it's usually tied to a memory of that person that's connecting to you. A lot of florists, or maybe perfume makers, people like that, they may be ones that would have this as a strong Clair sense. Now, the last one I'm aware of is clairgustance. I think I'm saying that right. But anywho, this is one, is the ability of taste. And I don't know that I've ever had this one, but the way it's described is that you will taste substances without them actually being in your mouth. And it tends to be associated with memories as well, most likely. Maybe you had a loved one that liked a certain kind of tea, and maybe when they're around, you'll suddenly taste it. So something like that. I've also seen reports of, you have psychics that help with cases, like police cases, and they may have the flavor of a chemical, or even the flavor of blood in their mouth that helps them have knowledge of the victim. I've also heard of it helping in the medical field, where it may give a sense of deficiencies and such in a patient. So like I said, I don't know that I've ever had this one. Tasting something like a tea, I think, okay, I'm okay with that. But some of the other things, the chemicals and whatnot, that would be difficult for me. Maybe that's why I don't have that sense, because, subconsciously, or creator knows that would be difficult for me. But I find that fascinating that happens for people. So it's very interesting. Now, in my experience, and I've had others tell me this as well, that most people tend to have one or two that tend to be their strong clairsenses, and the ones that they're going to get their main messages from or with. There are some that believe that you can practice the others and try to strengthen those. I don't know that I've ever met anyone that has all of them as really super strong. there tends to be one or two that are the ones that come up the most. Not to say that you won't have all of them at some point. It just kind of depends on you and how your senses work. But the thing I find interesting, I said it before, is how many people have one of these or more of these, and they just sort of chalk it up to normal life, or, oh, that was just a little sign from my grandma or from my mom. And it is. It is exactly what it is. But they don't realize that it's a true message and that this is something they could develop if they wanted to. Now, look, granted, not everyone will want to. But the point is, it's there if they would like to, and that could be just for themselves. You don't have to develop this gift so that you can go out and be a medium and help other people in that way. It could just be for you. So, but I do find it interesting how many people, they sort of get it. Oh, that's, like I said, that's my mom sending me a little sign. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. So I just think it's really neat. I also need to make sure I say this. I don't believe in coincidence, and I believe that we are all energetically connected, not only to each other, but to the universe, to God, creator, source, whatever you want to call, the divine source. But I believe we're all connected. So to me, the key is to kind of identify these things that you see or that you hear or that you smell, and take a minute. Take a minute to consider what it might really mean. Often, if you just relax, take some deep breaths and just allow it to happen, kind of, allow your mind to get quiet, that message, that meaning would start to come. So if you're interested in doing this, if you can find someone to work with to help you, that's a great thing. But if you want to just start yourself and see what you can figure out, maybe see if you want to look into this more, I would recommend just being mindful of the things that you see and that you hear. When an image suddenly pops into your head for no apparent reason, when you suddenly hear a song that sounds familiar, that reminds me of someone, or you smell that perfume out of the blue, no one's around you, just all of a sudden you smell that perfume. Or maybe those emotions, those are the crazy ones. Maybe all of a sudden your emotions are kind of all over the place. Maybe that's a Clair sense. And if you start to analyze it for a minute, stop and go, I wonder what that image might be about. And just take a moment, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and allow yourself to relax. Allow your mind to open up and ask the question in your head, what does that image mean to me? And you may then get that message. It may explain that, the image you saw was you playing with your mom as a kid, and maybe it's a message from her to remind you to be more childlike and to remember that childlike innocence. Or just, you smell her perfume and it's just a reminder of her that just makes you smile. It may be just as simple as that. You may even discover that it's not a message from someone else, but a message for you. Something that's going on within yourself that maybe could use some attention. But no matter what, I think it would be interesting to allow this to happen, and you may really start to connect the dots in your daily life. You may really start to realize just how often you're getting little messages or little nudges, little downloads, little times that God's going, hey, go this way. Hey, maybe think about this. And I know when I started doing this and figuring this out and really paying attention, it was beyond fascinating to see all the things I had missed before. And it has made a huge difference, not only in my life and how I handle my life, how I react to things, but in my growth, the things that I've been able to heal, the things that I've been able to work on in my life. And or maybe connections that I've been able to make, messages I've been able to give other people, or just that little download that makes me change my reaction to something that's happening in front of me, because the way I answer can subtly give the message that I just got downloaded to the person that's in front of me. I don't have to go, oh, look, I just got a message from you for Creator, where that person may look at you like you have three heads. But you may be able to just sort of adjust your answer, or just say something to them, or offer them a gift or something that allows you to kind of convey that message to them. So you might be surprised what you start to see, what you start to learn, not only about yourself, but the people around you, as you start to just pay attention to those little things that are happening, because they may not just be little things. They may be little messages, little reminders. So it's something to consider. And like I said, you can start looking at it yourself. And if it's something you're really interested in and you'd really like to develop, then, you can look to find someone to work with to do that. So another thing that became super apparent to me after my first session was how important meditation was. Y'all are going to laugh. I did an episode on that too. That was back season 1, episode 18. It was about meditation and prayer. Kind of talked about how they were alike and how they were different and whatnot. But quieting our mind is really the best way to allow messages and connections to come and to be more clear. And that was part of my homework that first time, remember? So I started really meditating, and, kind of connecting and letting whatever was supposed to come. And here's the thing. Most of us are like this, okay? We're at work. We have kids. We have husbands, wives, whatever. We have a lot of noise and a lot of busyness in our lives, right? We have a lot going on. So no wonder we can't see or hear those little subtle things that we need, because often God, Creator, Source, it's not going to be the billboard in the sky like I know I frequently ask for. It's going to be more subtle. It's going to be that whisper, right? But I think a lot of us could use that moment to quiet our minds. I think it helps us to sort of condition ourselves in a different way. Once you get used to meditation and you get used to that quiet and kind of what it takes for you to drop into that moment, it becomes easier to do. Sometimes I'll say I tap in. I get quiet and I tap in to my third eye. I tap in to my connection with Creator, I guess, is probably the easiest way to explain it. But I have to get quiet and I have to drop into that space to allow my mind to open. And I think when you practice meditation, you can do that a little quicker, and you can do that kind of on the fly. You don't have to be in your room with headphones and music and a candle and, it's got to be dark and all those things. You could be just about anywhere and allow yourself to drop into that moment once it becomes a habit. I know when I first started out, I did, I think 5 minutes at a time, and I just, okay, let me focus on just my breathing, because staying focused was almost impossible at first. But I gradually started understanding how to do it. And for me, it was focusing on my breathing and literally pushing the other things away out of my brain and allowing my mind to really get quiet. But that's what it really was for me. And truthfully, in many ways, it still is. It's just that time that I quiet my mind. I get still and I listen for what I need to hear. And again, as I practice more, it got easier to drop into that quiet, easier to stay in it longer, easier to understand what was my own voice, my own thoughts, and what was, other voices that I needed to hear. So maybe we should have done this before, but what is meditation? Well, meditation is a practice that involves focusing or clearing your mind using a combination of mental and physical techniques. Depending on the type of meditation you choose, you can meditate to relax, to reduce anxiety and stress, and more. Now, that was from the clevelandclinic.org, because y'all know I love me some Google to find a good definition of something. And this is actually, that's pretty simplified, but that at its core is really what it is. And the reality is, there's lots of ways you can meditate. Like I said, I started out very simply. I used a book actually that explained what to do. Again, I did 5 minutes to start. I've used guided meditation online. Those really help me because they keep my mind focused, because my mind will wander a lot. Like it takes me, there's often takes me a good 10 minutes just to stop the mind wandering and get settled in, so I need some extra time so that I can just get myself focused. So a guided meditation is great for me. You can often find meditation music, which I love that, because that helps me focus and push the other things out of my mind. I like to set an intention before I start my meditation, and just sort of then let whatever is supposed to flow happen. So maybe before I start, I ask for guidance on a project, let's say. And then I just let myself fall into that state, and I see what comes. What images, what music, what feelings, all those things we talked about before, those Clair senses. That's the same stuff I'm looking for here. It's an image, and I start to say, okay, what does that image mean to me? What are you trying to tell me? Or maybe I ask, Creator, what does that mean? What are you trying to tell me? But you can drop into a meditative state in a lot of ways. Have you ever noticed that when you do something that's somewhat mundane, kind of a little bit mindless, maybe a repetitive task, that's when you really start to think? That's when all the great ideas you've ever had, that's when they come to you. Or right as you wake up, or right as you go to sleep. So why do you think that is? Because that's when your mind is most relaxed. You aren't thinking anymore. You're not processing. You're not trying to figure out how you're going to get all the kids everywhere they need to be, and how you're going to pay this bill, and how you're going to finish this project at work. Okay, you're not thinking all about all of those things. Your mind has relaxed. Maybe when you're washing dishes, doing housework, working in your flower bed, taking a shower. Because think about it, those are almost subconscious acts, right? You aren't really even having to think about what you're doing. You take a shower in the same way probably every time you do it. Maybe you start with your hair, then you go and you go all the way down, then you do your feet, then you do, then you dry off the same way. You put, you comb your hair the same way, all the things. But when you're doing that, you're not really thinking. You're not doing critical thinking. That's when your mind can really open up. And maybe it's not a message per se. Maybe it's when your creativity starts flowing. That's when you have this great idea for the next book you're going to write, or the next story you want to write, or the next picture you want to take, or painting you want to do. But have you ever also considered that this is when Creator is giving you all those things that you needed to hear, no matter what they're for? Just a thought. And I'll tell you, I have found this helpful so many times in my daily life too. If I'm a little bit stressed at work, I'm doing an event and I'm just really, really having a lot of anxiety or a lot of stress about it, I can just close my door for a minute, or maybe even go in the restroom and just take a minute to close my eyes, focus on my breathing, just focus on feeling my chest rise and fall, just for 2 minutes. Or when you feel the breath going in and out of your nose, you feel it, and it's cool as it goes in and out, right? And you just sort of allow all of those things that you're worried about, just clear your mind of them. Literally imagine that you're pushing them out. Push all those thoughts away and just focus on your breath. And I'm telling you, even for 2-3 minutes, you will feel yourself instantly relax. And I've used that method when I know I need to focus on a download. Y'all, my ears ring a lot. I don't know about y'all, but usually if my ear rings, just all of a sudden there's a loud ringing in one of my ears, I know that means there's a download I need to focus on. So I'll take a minute and I'll let myself, what did we say? We kind of drop in. let myself clear my mind for a minute so that I could relax and clear all the noise and let whatever's supposed to come in, come in. I try to keep a journal handy if I can, but if nothing else, just a piece of paper that I can jot down what I'm seeing or what I'm hearing. Because there are times when, okay, I've got the gist of it, but I don't really have time to get into it deeply. Okay, well, let me just write it down and I'm going to come back to that later when I get home and I can get quiet maybe, or, really quiet for a longer period of time. Or, use the notes app on your phone. But if there's something that comes in, write it down, keep track of it. But this also helps me identify what I'm feeling or seeing or hearing. Like I told you, that sudden bout of anxiety that day, was it mine? No. So I took a breath. Okay, let me drop into my breath work and let me see what's going on and see what kind of message I need to get. And it was someone that was trying to connect with me, and I was able to make that connection, kind of took some notes until I could really deliver the message that I needed to deliver. But I needed to drop into that space to be able to do that. And I have found that the best way to do this is when I practice meditation. Because again, practice creates habits, right? And it makes it easier to be able to do that and to drop into that space. And look, like we said, meditation can come in many forms. It's an excellent way to manage anxiety or stress. Also a great way to get those messages or downloads if you wish to work on that gift. And I find it very similar to prayer, and that it's something I work on. I try to practice every day. And the truth is, I can kind of feel it when I don't. I don't feel I'm as calm or as even when I haven't gotten my meditation in. Even if it's just that 5 minutes, it can really make a big difference in how my day goes. But if you're curious about meditation, I really encourage you to try it. Again, there are many guided meditations out there that you could try. There's some really nice, easy to follow books that you could look at. But it's like a lot of things. It's not one size fits all. I know people that just can't seem to do it. They just can't seem to quiet their minds, with music or breathing or any of that. I know others who fall asleep. I do that, especially if I'm really tired. I'll kind of drop in and get really comfortable and fall asleep. But maybe another option is, like I said, maybe do some housework. Maybe go for a walk. Getting out in nature is a great way to get into a meditative state. But just whatever thing like that works for you, that can allow you to get into the headspace that you need. So you may need to experiment with that a little bit and kind of find out what really works for you. I also want to say that as you get into these things, the exploration and education of things, you may find that they're similar across belief systems and religions. We may all just call it different things, but at their core, they're the same thing. And if it's not your bag, you know what? No harm, no foul. Moving on. But at least you do it with more knowledge and education. But if you are interested, I recommend looking for people that you can trust to help you. And remember that gut feeling we talked about? Trust it. If someone doesn't feel right, move on. Because you know what? The person you need will be out there and you'll find them. And as always, I tell people all this time, if I can help you in any way, feel free to reach out. If I can help you, I will. Or if not, I'll do what I can to help you find the resource that you need. But most of all, I hope an episode like this one really helps you understand that you're not alone. We're all in this together. And you might be surprised how many others are going through the exact same thing or are having just similar experiences. You aren't crazy. You're gifted. And I don't know about you, but I find that knowing what it is really helps me. It calms me. Once I knew what this was, then I could make a decision about what to do next. Either develop or not. I could use it to help others, or just know what it was to help me, to be more helpful for myself. And you can make that same decision. So no matter what decision you make, do what's right for you. But the more you know, the better you can feel about that decision, right? Okay, so I think I've covered enough today, you think? So let's call this one done. But my friends, stay safe and stay curious. Thanks so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it has helped you move forward in your journey in some way. Make sure and like and rate and subscribe and, do all those things for our podcast because it really helps us out. Links and other important things you need to know will be in the show notes. And if you have ideas of topics you'd like to hear about or questions you want us to answer, you can drop those on the Soulful Wanderings page on either Facebook or Instagram, or you can drop us an email. Again, check the show notes for all that. If you're interested in theta healing or reading or just more spiritual topics, head over to our website, soulfulwanderings.com. In the meantime, take care of yourself and each other. Until next time.